All right, we're going to talk about signaling in the autonomic nervous system. This primarily is by the release of neurotransmitters. That's the main chemical messenger, but there's going to be some hormones involved because we're going to have the bloodstream be involved. We're going to rely on some things you know about neurotransmitters and also what you know about receptors. So recall there are two main categories of receptors in terms of their general effects. One is ionotropic, which is direct. These are chemically gated ion channels that result in the opening of ion channels or closing, and direct then depolarization. So this is quick and limited in what it can do, right? It's really for signaling. So quick signaling is what this is for. The second type, metabotropic, the main type that we're going to be talking about is G protein coupled. And these can result in ion channels opening. And that's what we saw in the nervous system previously. But they also can result in other cellular effects. And these are going to be particularly important in autonomic signaling. These receptors are going to be present on our target organs. And this is how we get those effects like release of a substance from a gland or increased contractility, dilation of airways, because we're going to activate other proteins instead of just depolarize. So this is going to be more complex and varied effects. And effects, not just signaling. Okay, so we're going to see both of these important types. I'm going to go through this image from the book kind of more briefly, and then I'm going to have my own image is very similar that I'm going to add some more detail to. So you know about the somatic nervous system. That's what's shown here. Acetylcholine released from the motor neuron to stimulate skeletal muscle. If we add in the autonomic nervous system, it's a lot more complicated. So we have the sympathetic and parasympathetic with their two neuron chain, releasing acetylcholine from that preganglionic neuron. But then the postganglionic neuron is varied. So it's going to be either norepinephrine or acetylcholine, depending on which division we're talking about. The effects of this on the target organ are also varied. So it can either be stimulatory or inhibitory, depending on the neurotransmitter and the specific receptor involved. And that's where we can start to get more varied effects. Okay, so let's do this in a little more detail with kind of the schematic I made that's basically showing the same thing. Somatic nervous system, um, and then we add in autonomic with its ganglia and color-coded parasympathetic and sympathetic separately. And then we've got acetylcholine released from the somatic motor neuron and the preganglionic neuron of each division of the ANS, including directly onto the adrenal medulla. And we've also then got it binding to nicotinic receptors. Nicotinic receptors, you might remember, are a type of cholinergic receptor. So they're ligand gated or chemically gated, same thing, ion channels. They're a type of cholinergic. Acetylcholine binds to them. Okay. So this is good for signaling, quick signaling, just telling this ganglionic cell to fire or the skeletal muscle to contract. Oops. Okay, sorry. Then we've got um, acetylcholine also released from this ganglionic neuron. This is going to bind to a muscarinic receptor. That is G protein coupled. Similarly, norepinephrine is released from the sympathetic nervous system. That's going to bind to adrenergic receptors, which are also G protein coupled. This is going to give us those varied effects on those viscera. I will just add it here as well. From the adrenal medulla, we have norepinephrine and epinephrine that is going to travel around and bind to those same adrenergic receptors throughout the body. Okay, so let's start with a little bit more detail of the acetylcholine receptors, which are also called cholinergic. So here's the kind of schematic of the two of, well, this is the first type. This type is our, what do you think? I don't think I have this come up. Nicotinic. It's ligand gated, right? Acetylcholine binds to the ion channel itself. That causes the ion channel to open and primarily sodium to flow inside the cell, depolarizing the target cell. So that's a nicotinic receptor. These, again, I said this before, these receptors are located in skeletal muscle, the neuromuscular junction of skeletal muscle, and on the ganglion neurons themselves, the neurons that are in the ganglia. I'm actually going to bring up, I think I have it next here, this image reminding you of where this is. So I could color code this nicotinic receptor is this, those are located right here, right? As well as in the somatic nervous system that I'm not showing here. The second type of acetylcholine receptor is the muscarinic receptor. So these are G protein coupled. So when acetylcholine binds to them, the G protein changes shape, is activated, activates other proteins, and has other effects in the cell. That's it for now. Muscarinic are G protein coupled. Same messenger, different result. And these guys are located on the viscera or whatever target organs themselves. Okay, so that's the last point there, visceral, on the visceral effectors. Okay, so two types. Going back through here, we're now going to do the second part here. So let's look at norepinephrine and epinephrine and their effects on adrenergic, either alpha or beta. Both are present on the target organs to allow for adrenergic, which is the sympathetic signal. Okay, so this is what we're talking about here. And what we're going to have is, we'll choose a different color here. I'm going to draw two different receptors here. One is going to be beta, and one's going to be alpha. Both G proteins. So we got a G protein, both the G protein coupled receptors. Beta could be abbreviated just with the beta, and this is alpha. Could be abbreviated just with alpha. And here's our G protein. So that's our kind of setup there. Acetylcholine, I think I had it be kind of, well, I'll make it the same color that I have it in that image on the top. So it's that green triangle going to bind to the receptor, cause that G protein to disassociate, activate On the beta receptor, it's going to activate adenylyl cyclase, which is an enzyme that activates CAMP. CAMP is our second messenger. The messenger that's inside the cell, it's going to then have effects. So there's actually then still two types of beta receptors, beta 1 and beta 2. Beta 1 is going to increase cardiac muscle stimulation and contraction. I'm sorry, they should say beta 2 then. Beta 2 is going to cause smooth muscle to relax. This is going to be in the respiratory and skeletal blood vessels. Also respiratory, the lungs themselves dilate the lungs. So relaxing is dilating. For the alpha receptor, this is going to activate a calcium. That is the second messenger. Calcium is activated. That's going to result in smooth muscle contraction in the vessels to digestive system. Right? We're trying to fight or flight. We don't want to rest and digest. Also, the smooth muscle for pupils to dilate. Obviously, there's other effects of the autonomic nervous system. These are just a few examples here of what these receptors are involved in regulating. All things that make sense related to how the sympathetic nervous system affects our physiology, increasing heart contracting, airflow to the lungs, dilating blood vessels to the skeletal muscles, contracting blood vessels to the digestive system, and dilating the pupils. So this is an example of application of what you just learned with one specific example. How could the blood vessels, when you are stressed out, so sympathetic nervous system activation occurring here. So there's a bear, not a very scary bear color. The blood vessels in your intestines constrict. That's part of decreased digestion. The blood vessels that bring blood to and from your skeletal muscles dilate. So this is about, let's just say, running. This is going to allow you to run. This is going to allow you to stop digestion. Why? Well, we want to have our energy be going to running, not to digestion. We want the blood to flow this way. Dilation is going to open up that blood vessel and cause blood to flow here, more blood. This is called vasodilation. Blood vessels constricting is going to have less blood come here to the digestive system. This is called vasoconstriction. Could you talk about the receptors involved in how this same hormone, so epinephrine, norepinephrine is also going to be active. I'm going to use epinephrine as an example. How can it do two different things in blood vessels? This is blood vessels in either situation. Well, the answer is different receptors. So here is a nice image of the multiple effects of epinephrine. It can bind to different types of receptors. Remember, adrenergic, that's any receptor that binds norepinephrine or epinephrine. So there's different types of adrenergic receptors. Alpha and beta are both types of adrenergic receptors. Epinephrine can bind to either one of them. Epinephrine is coming from where? The adrenal medulla, circulating throughout the bloodstream. Similar idea for norepinephrine would exist. Epinephrine is going to bind to this alpha receptor, and because of that, the effects that it has on alpha receptors, that's going to be that calcium second messenger that's going to cause constriction of blood vessels in the GI tract. When epinephrine, same epinephrine, binds to the beta-2 receptor, that's going to cause CAMP to be activated and ultimately cause the dilation of smooth muscles in the skeletal, going to the skeletal muscles, as well as the bronchioles, the tubes going to the respiratory passageways. So the same signaling molecules has opposite effects in two different effectors. That's important for this coordinated body response